nice piece of architecture. Well, it was when it was standing, but whatever the Anglicans decide to do with their church is their business.
It's their business.
Yeah, and I don't think it's anyone's right to tell them what to do or what not to do. To be honest, that's just my opinion.
Yeah, no, that's what we get you on. Sam said that the cathedral was pretty controversial, I guess, but never that great in the first place. To quote, too small, too pedestrian, and ultimately a pastiche of another time and place. English, Victorian, Gothic. Harsh words, but oh gosh, does he have a point?
Yeah, I think he does, and I think the thing is that the thing about the cathedral was was in the middle of Christchurch, or still is, and so it was a centrepiece, and we used to talk about Christchurch and being a cathedral city because of that. And Sam also said, I felt really sad actually reading it, where he said that it's fenced off, abandoned, full of rats and pigeons, and is still a vivid memory of the earthquake. And I think that every time I go to Christchurch is that, it's really sad. So I don't necessarily agree. I just think Christchurch needs to decide what it wants to be in the future. The earthquake did create a great opportunity to say what is Christchurch going to be in the future? What is a modern city like? And a good example is Dresden in Germany, that was totally destroyed in the war, and it was rebuilt, including the main cathedral, because they'd wanted it, and now it's a tourism spot, which I don't think is over tourism, but I'm not sure. But so it was a long-term investment. So they said, what are we going to be in the future as Dresden? And they made a decision and they did it. So it's whatever you do in Christchurch is going to cost money, but what an opportunity to say, are we a cathedral city? Does the cathedral matter, or is it something else now?
Glenn, and you're getting a bit of support here, Anton. Glenn from Christchurch, Anton has nailed it. So there you go.
Thanks, Glenn. We should catch up for a coffee. I know a place.
Yeah, just don't complain about the coffee.
Yes,
right,
yes, indeed. Another one here. Christchurch City Council ratepayers funded the Anglican Cathedral hundreds of thousands of dollars each year. So, yeah, we should have a say. But it's interesting, isn't it? That call, though, I mean, there have been calls actually for a long time, because Christchurch did lose its multicultural centre. I think it was early 2017. Anton, and since then there were calls, prior to the attacks of...
Sorry, what was that? We lost our... what did you say, sorry? A multicultural
we lost the multicultural centre. And there have been calls for a multicultural hub that everybody could use and go to, a new multicultural hub to be built in Christchurch, and this could be it. What a chance in a lifetime.
Yeah, well, I mean, there are lots of really awesome things going on in Christchurch that that don't centre around the cathedral. I mean, I know that there's a really, really awesome waka tourism project been happening on the river there, which is going to be really, really exciting to see how that comes to life. I mean, there are lots and lots of things going on. I don't subscribe to the notion that Christchurch lives and dies based on what happens to the cathedral. It just doesn't. I mean, it's been a long time since the earthquake, and I just sort of wake up and carry on with my day. Would it be nice for it to be cleaned up one way or the other? Absolutely. Just for no other reason except that it is an eyesore and it does just look a little bit messy. But yeah, no, look, I'm not that fussed about it, to be honest.
Another one here, regarding Anton's views on the cathedral. So you're getting a bit of support here, Anton. We'll have to get you back again. And it's been wonderful to have you both on the Friday afternoon on the panel. Cass Carter and Anton Matthews, I really appreciate your time. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.
And thank you so much to our producers, Ali Ventura here. Checkpoint. See you on Monday.
Te whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. On tonight's programme, the man accused of the Christchurch mosque massacres is ordered to undergo a mental health assessment. He was beamed into court via an audio-visual link as families of the dead and the injured themselves watched on. For the first time since the mass shootings, Friday prayers returned to the Linwood mosque, where 7 people were killed. Embattled Hamilton Councillor James Casson is forced to deliver his mea culpa for inflammatory comments in a mosque car park when he wasn't welcome inside. And in other news, work and income staff are turning away homeless people in Auckland. And is it a robbery? The Duke and Duchess of Sussex pinch an Instagram handle.
RNZ News at 5. Good evening, I'm Susana Leatawa. The man accused of killing 50 people in the Christchurch mosque shootings has been ordered by a judge to undergo a mental health assessment. In an unprecedented court appearance, Brenton Tarrant, who faces 50 charges of murder and 39 of attempted murder, appeared via a video link at the High Court in Christchurch. Conan Young was in court.
The accused has been held in solitary confinement at Auckland prison at Parimoremo. No plea was entered and he was remanded in custody until June 14th, while a mental health assessment is done. The hearing was the first opportunity for families and those injured in the mosque attacks to set eyes on him. About 50 of them filled the gallery, including one of the injured, who was brought into court in a wheelchair, still wearing his hospital gown. Outside court, another survivor, Tafazal Alam, who was in the Linwood mosque during the shootings, said he was upset at the lack of emotion shown by the accused gunman. Kei Ototahi Aho, ko Conan Young tēnei.
The Westland District Mayor says cleaning up rubbish strewn along the coastline could potentially take months, not weeks. Torrential rain that battered the west coast last week swept rubbish out of the closed Fox Glacier landfill and along the coast. The Westland District Council says rubbish has been sighted as far south as Martins Bay in Fiordland and up to Okarito in the north. The Mayor Bruce Smith says the Fox River has been successfully diverted away from the landfill to stop the flow of rubbish. But he says the clean-up efforts are far from over.
Each time we get a flood, there will be rubbish that at the present time caught in under rocks or in scrub down the Fox River. Every time we get a flood, it will get loose and head down the river again.
Bruce Smith says more staff and volunteers will arrive over the weekend to bolster the recovery efforts from early next week. A person has been arrested in relation to what police are describing as a serious incident in the Wellington suburb of Korori. The police were alerted to the incident at about 1:10 this afternoon. A spokesperson says the incident is isolated to Lemnos Avenue and the street has been cordoned off. The police are not seeking anyone else in relation to the incident and they're assuring the public there is no threat to their safety. A neighbour says residents have had to park on other streets while the cul-de-sac remains cordoned off. She says 2 ambulances and paramedics in a 4-wheel drive vehicle were also at the scene. Drivers are being warned to stay vigilant after one of New Zealand's worst weeks in road history. 18 people have died on New Zealand roads since Monday, with at least 6 of them under the age of 18. The AA's road safety spokesperson Dylan Thompson says that it isn't just drunk drivers or people speeding that cause crashes.
I think people often do get quite casual and blasé about the risks that are out on the roads, but the other thing is there's no one silver bullet, there's no easy answer that can fix all of this.
The AA's road safety spokesperson Dylan Thompson, the Associate Minister of Transport Julianne Genter, says that more work needs to be done on enforcement of road rules. Police figures show that the number of tickets given out for not wearing a seatbelt has dropped by 49% in the last decade. Devonport schools are warning children to walk in groups after several reports of a man approaching children inappropriately. Belmont Intermediate School Principal Nick Hill says in the past week, 2 of his pupils said a man in his 30s in a white van pulled up closely behind them as they were walking alone or to and from school. In one case, the man got out of the van and in the other he followed the girl. The girls felt unsafe and ran away, then rang their mothers who picked them up. The man had a white Toyota van. Mr Hill says the girls gave detailed descriptions and did the right thing by getting to safety and telling an adult. Another school in the area has reported a man with a 7-seater Toyota van was seen on the school's playground this morning. Mr Hill has requested extra police patrols and parents have been asked to talk with children about being safe and walking together. WorkSafe has warned Fletcher Construction about its unsafe practices on a $100 million Auckland wastewater project. The company is building the Northern Interceptor pipeline for water care and the site has been given 2 improvement notices for unsafe work. WorkSafe says it had concerns about the site reported to it at the end of March. Now Fletcher has until mid-April to develop a system to manage and control the risk of silica dust, which can cause serious lung disease. Fletcher is also required to maintain safe distances between people and equipment on site. Watercare says it's concerned about the issue and has made Fletcher aware of its worries. It's 5:05. The former All Black Israel Dag says without the support of Crusaders coach Scott Robertson, he wouldn't have been able to squeeze another couple of years out of his rugby career. The 30-year-old 66 Test veteran is retiring because of ongoing knee injuries and says he came close to hanging up his boots when he missed out on the 2015 World Cup.
He's made me enjoy the game, really. If I was completely honest, I fell out of love with the game in 2015, and I was pretty close to doing what I'm doing today. So, I've got a lot of time for the Crusaders, and I'm spending the rest of this year with the team and just going to really enjoy the moment.
Meanwhile, All Blacks coach Steve Hansen has reportedly signed with Japanese side Toyota Verblitz as director of rugby after the World Cup. It's the same club All Blacks skipper Kieran Reid is joining. The Warriors coach Stephen Kearney is feeling the heat early in the NRL season after two big losses to the West's Tigers and Manly. Kearney concedes his sides in a rut ahead of tonight's match against the Gold Coast Titans in Auckland.
One thing I know, when you find yourself in a bit of a hole, which is where we are at the minute, you got to work hard to get yourself out of it. Nothing changes in terms of our process. It's about working hard to fix the things that we need to be better at. That's what we've been doing this week.
Stephen Kearney. The New Zealand golfers Lydia Ko and Danny Lee are both tied for sixth, 2 shots off the lead after the opening round of their respective events on the LPGA and US PGA tours. Ko shot a 2-under par 70 in the first round of the first major of the year, the ANA Inspiration in California. Lee has shot a 4-under first-up round at the Texas Open. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Country Life visits Nuhaka, just up the road from Wairoa, home to about 300 people with a thriving chess club and a booming market garden. Anna Coddington is our Friday Night Live act, and Duncan McGilvray introduces us to the element uranium. So of course we have a sonic tonic dedicated to the songs and sound bites of radiation. On Nights with me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland to North Taranaki, including the Central High Country and Eastern Bay of Plenty. Cloudy periods, isolated showers in Northland and Auckland today. Scattered afternoon and evening showers tomorrow, possibly heavy. Coromandel Peninsula and Western Bay of Plenty, showers turning to rain tonight with heavy falls tomorrow. South Taranaki to Kapiti, also Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, a few showers. Wairarapa, Wellington, Marlborough and North Canterbury, rain with heavy falls tomorrow. For the remainder of Canterbury, rain easing to showers today, becoming fine tomorrow. Nelson and Bulla, cloudy periods with scattered showers today and tomorrow night. Westland and Fiordland, showers and Westland clearing, then fine everywhere. Otago and Southland, showers mostly coastal, clearing to fine tomorrow. At the Chatham Islands, cloudy periods and the odd shower. It's 5:08. You're with RNZ National.
Thanks, Susanna, and this is Checkpoint. I'm Lisa Owen. First tonight, the man accused of killing 50 people in the Christchurch mosque shootings has been ordered by a judge to undergo a mental health assessment. In an unprecedented court appearance 3 weeks after the attacks, Brenton Tarrant was beamed into the High Court in Christchurch via audio-visual link. For many families of the victims, it was their first opportunity to see the 28-year-old accused gunman. He faces 50 charges of murder and a further 39 for attempted murder, but he entered no pleas today. Our court reporter Annika Smith was at the hearing and joins us now via live view from the Justice Precinct in Christchurch. Annika, can you describe what it was like in court today?
Kia ora, Lisa. It was an intense but brief hearing in the High Court at Christchurch this morning. Now, the public gallery was packed with members of the Muslim community, top policemen. We had victims advisors there as well, and as you know, about 24 media outlets from local and international places. Now, when the accused flicked onto the large television screen in the courtroom, we saw that he had his hands cuffed to his belt, and he was wearing a grey long-sleeve shirt. Now, his demeanour was very calm, but he was also very focused in the hearing. We saw him listening intently throughout the entire proceeding. And we initially thought that he would represent himself. We initially thought he would represent himself, but late last night we got confirmation that 2 Auckland lawyers, Shane Tate and Jonathan Hudson, would be representing him. And we had confirmation just this afternoon from the Ministry of Justice that the accused gunman sought legal aid and was granted it, which is provided to people who can't afford their own lawyers.
So in terms of actually the procedural appearance, what happened?
Yeah, so this was his first High Court appearance, and it was largely procedural and administrative. Barnaby Howes, who is the Crown Prosecutor, confirmed that a further 49 murder charges and 39 attempted murder charges had been laid. He sought suppression for the name of a woman who was named in the initial single murder charge laid against the accused gunman, who that woman was actually still alive. She hadn't died. He sought suppression for her name and also for the names of the 39 people named in the attempted murder charges. Now, these were granted by Justice Manda.
So the accused is now going to undergo a mental health assessment, isn't he?
Yes, one of his defence lawyers, Shane Tate, asked that a mental health expert examine his client under the Mental Health Act. And this was also suggested by the Crown, and it's important to note that this is a fairly normal procedure. Justice Manda ordered that 2 mental health assessments be done, and he stressed that this was just straightforward procedure and nothing should be read into this.
It will be another couple of months before he appears again as well, is that right?
Yes, Shane Tate indicated that the mental health reports might take 2 to 3 months, and this was due to the complexity of the case and also the fact that it might be hard to access the accused gunman as the state he's in is in high security prison. Justice Manda remanded him in custody to reappear in the High Court for his second High Court appearance on the 14th of June, and it will be then that we will have a clearer idea of whether he'll be fit to plead, and we'll go forward from there.
Thank you for that. That's Annika Smith, our court reporter, who's in Christchurch and was at the appearance today. As mentioned, Shane Tate is a lawyer for the accused gunman, and he told Checkpoint this afternoon that his client's concerns inside prison are currently being addressed. A spokesperson for Corrections told us that the accused is being managed in accordance with the provisions set out in the Corrections Act and its international obligations for the treatment of prisoners. It says at this time he has no access to television, radio or newspapers and no approved visitors. Dozens of people gathered in the High Court today for the appearance of the accused gunman, with one man coming from his hospital bed to be a witness. Security was high, with armed police at both entrances to the court building and a vehicle carrying a police armed defenders unit circling the block. Our reporter Rachel Graham was there.
Tafasal Alim was at the Linwood mosque when the accused gunman opened fire. He told Checkpoint in the days after the attack that he was too scared to pray outside his home and had become afraid of strangers. But today he faced those fears and travelled to the High Court in Christchurch to see the accused with his own eyes. It was something he wasn't able to do on the day of the shootings.
And I didn't see him during the shooting. I was laying down on the floor. So I want to see how he feels after killing 50 peoples, innocent peoples.
Tafasal Alim says the accused gunman showed no emotion during today's short hearing.
Very upset to see him. He killed 50 people and he doesn't look like he bothered, you know.
About 50 people filled the public gallery, including one of the injured who left his hospital bed and was brought into court in a wheelchair, still wearing his hospital gown. 2 sons of one of the victims, 71-year-old Haji Daoud Nabi, who died in the Al Noor Mosque, also decided to go to court. Yama Nabi says it was a difficult day for his family.
I'm trying to stand strong to come here, because I don't want my mum to come over here, so I did this, see what he had to say.
His brother Omar Nabi says it was good to see the accused for himself, but he's frustrated at the 2-month delay in order to get a mental health assessment before the accused gunman's next appearance. It's not the outcome they wanted.
It is very painful to go through a process which shouldn't actually, take that long, a process that, needs to be taken in steps, and him not given the rights as a petty theft person. You know, this is going to High Court. You know, this is not on.
Shahid Tanzir Mohammed, whose brother Suhail was killed in the attacks, travelled from New York to be in Christchurch. He says he's disturbed and upset at the slow pace of justice.
I want it speedy, very speedy. Should be speedy trial, special trial, and it's gonna be getting close. Like I think in a week, in a month, means everything is on the record. So it's already 3 weeks passed away. I'm from New York, and I'm expecting the speedy trial from this court.
Police aren't ruling out further charges against the accused gunman. His next court appearance is expected to be in mid-June. In Christchurch for Checkpoint, Rachel Graham.
And today was the first time Friday prayers were held at Linwood Mosque 3 weeks after the shooting. 7 worshippers died at the mosque before the gunman ran away. Our South Island visual journalist Logan Church was there.
Just after 1 o'clock this afternoon, about 30 people came to pray at the Linwood Mosque. What happened here 3 weeks ago was clearly weighing on people's minds. The room, about the size of a small classroom, had a strong smell from the new blue-grey carpet. When I arrived, I was graciously welcomed inside, members of the community explaining to me and the 1 or 2 other journalists here what was happening. Given though what had happened at this mosque, their hospitality was humbling. Today's prayers and the speech, which was described to us as sort of like a sermon, was led by a visiting imam from Melbourne, Robbie Beatty.
We came as an important and needed visit to our brothers and sisters in Christchurch, to visit the people in the hospital, at the same time to speak to our congregation here, Muslim members, and the biggest family of Christchurch. We appreciate everything we have seen of support and kindness.
I asked him what his main message was to this congregation who had lost so much.
A message of kindness and mercy and justice, care and love. This is indeed the message of this mosque and every mosque on the globe.
Outside the mosque, flowers and tributes to the fallen still line the fence, and even more being added today. Armed police still guard the driveway. But the attitude of those here today was one of optimism and hope.
Ignorance, of course, is a problem, and we need to know Muslims in Islam by coming closer to them and try to understand what is their Islam. As you see, the mosque is always opened, and those who attend the mosque are just people like them, and they do have life and families and responsibilities, duties, and yet they do attend the mosque for the prayers and for the values of Islam. So I would say, you need to, if you really you need to know them, you need to come visit them and see them. And as you see, it's always welcomed. And really, don't prejudge Muslims just for the propaganda and whatever you may hear in the media, unfortunately.
In Christchurch for Checkpoint, Logan Church.
It's 18 minutes after 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. We'd love to hear from you, so do send us your feedback. You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or flick us an email, checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Work and income staff are turning away homeless people in Auckland, telling them there is no emergency housing available in the city. Checkpoint has learnt of several cases over the last month where 2 Auckland work and income officers have told people seeking emergency accommodation that there is none. In some cases, they're handed a list of non-government emergency housing providers, but in at least one case, they were given no alternative and left the office in tears. Michelle Cook reports.
Talia's husband slept in a car for 4 months while she and their 4 children squeezed into one room in a boarding situation that was unsustainable for them and the landlord. After being given 1 month's notice, she started searching for private rentals, applying for dozens of properties, but her bad credit history didn't help when she was up against hundreds of others also searching for a home. With 2 days left until they had to move out, Talia visited the Otara Work and Income Office last week to ask for help with emergency accommodation.
They couldn't help me. They just told me that all of the emergency housings are full, so they couldn't do anything. So I had to look for a motel or something.
Do they offer you any alternatives?
No.
Talia, who works full-time on minimum wage, was able to afford a motel for 2 nights for her husband and herself, while the children stayed with family. But she says she was traumatised by her experience.
I was so upset and emotional. I cried when I left there. I hadn't even gone out the door and I was already crying. And she saw I started tearing up, but still nothing, didn't even get, any feeling sorry for me or anything from her.
Guided by a homeless worker she met several years ago, Talia visited a different work and income office on Monday, which helped her secure accommodation from Tuesday night, but nothing for Monday. The couple ended up sleeping in the car. An Auckland non-government emergency housing provider says Talia's case is one of about 10 they have come across in the last month, where people have been told by staff at Work and Income's Otara and Otahuhu branches there is no emergency housing. Instead, they've been given a list of non-government providers to try. Auckland Action Against Poverty spokesperson Ricardo Menendez-March says he's not surprised people have been told there's no emergency accommodation. But he says it's not specific to just 2 offices. He knows of similar stories throughout Auckland. Mr. Menendez-March says case managers need to give people real options and not just send them out into the cold night.
While we understand case managers don't have control over motel availability, we do expect that they would be taking additional steps to ensure they don't leave a person homeless and without adequate shelter.
And Mr. Menendez-March says it's not sustainable or appropriate for the government to keep using motels for the bulk of its emergency housing.
What we're experiencing on the ground should be a call for central government to ramp up the build of state homes and social housing, as well as looking for state-run temporary accommodations such as shelters or, a government's own emergency housing providers rather than relying on the moteliers.
The social housing waitlist has more than doubled in the past 2 years to more than 10,000. Mr. Menendez-March says many of those waiting need emergency housing in the meantime. For Checkpoint, Michelle Cook.
Ministry of Social Development Regional Commissioner Mark Goldsmith says in a statement that emergency housing isn't always available in Otara and Otahuhu, but is in the wider Auckland area. He says management has spoken to staff and can't find any instance of clients being told there's no emergency housing in the wider Auckland area. He encourages anyone who feels they haven't received adequate support to contact MSD. It was one small step towards reconciliation in Hamilton today as Councillor James Casson arrived at the Jamia Masjid to say sorry. The outspoken former policeman had earlier posted on Facebook that the terrorist has won if people keep mourning and holding vigils. Following his public apology on Checkpoint earlier this week, Mr Casson fronted at the mosque today, but as Alex Perrottet and cameraman Dan Cook report, he wasn't allowed inside and was forced to make his mea culpa in the car park.
Police officers had been on site since 6 a.m. ahead of Friday prayers at the Hamilton Mosque as around 200 people from a broad range of cultures streamed in. Lisa is a local and had made small gifts that she was handing out as she greeted worshippers with Assalamu alaikum. In the wake of James Casson's comments that the country needs to stop mourning and move on, she says she'd come to show her support.
I think a lot of people are now saying, let's move on, and I'm not ready to move on quite yet. I'm wanting to still show that support, show that it's ongoing love for the community, the Muslim community.
James Casson arrived on foot alone and was convinced he was going to be invited into the mosque to talk to the community. He was later joined by Councillor Dave McPherson, who only days ago was involved in a public slinging match with Mr Casson. He said the two of them thought better about it and quickly buried the hatchet.
Now it's all kiss and make up. So what's happened the last
Well,
few
it's not look, there was a human cost on James that you could see. His wife wasn't here, no one was here to support him, his family were all elsewhere, and we'd made our point. He couldn't take back what he'd said, but I think the turning point for me, and I know the Mayor, because we're in the same meeting, came when James said, I'm sorry, it's 100% my fault, no one else contributed, it was just me, and they stopped there. There was no equivocation or anything like it. It was that we believe it was a genuine apology, and I think we can all move forward. You know, you can't take back off the internet what's already on there.
As worshippers streamed out of the mosque, Waikato Muslim Association President Dr. Assad Mohsin was adamant Mr. Kassan stayed outside and asked anyone in the car park who wanted to hear the apology to come forward. A big ask for these people to approach a man who had earlier posted that Middle Easterners migrating to Europe were scum, and the solution to terror attacks there was retribution and extreme violence.
It is your choice whether you forgive him or not. That's absolutely up to the community. However, he's here, he's our guest.
All right, I've made some comments that may have caused offence to some in the Muslim community and the wider New Zealand public. So I've come down here today not to ask for any forgiveness, but to apologise for any offence caused. I want to make it known that sometimes I can be insensitive, but I'm not a racist person, and nothing was meant to cause offence to anybody. So that's why I'm here today, just to show my face, to say I am that person that has been reported, and that I want to apologise wholeheartedly to everyone in the Muslim faith and to anybody else that's taken offence.
Dr. Mohsin says although the comments were hurtful, anyone who apologises must at least be heard.
There were few people in the community who were intensely offended, and they also had thought that he should not even be allowed to come in the mosque. And I value what they're trying to say, and I can imagine where they are coming from. It just reflects how hurt they would have been.
But others were sceptical of Councillor Kassan's mea culpa. With local body elections coming up in September, the councillor has made it clear he intends to run for the mayoralty.
He's just trying to get back into office, basically. He understands it's his election year. I don't think he actually is apologetic about it. I think he's purely doing it because of the uproar. He feels as if he needs to apologise just to save his own face.
I think it's disgusting. I don't think that it should have been said at all, especially in a place where the Muslim community is so strong here in Hamilton. Especially after the terror attacks, the Hamilton people really banded together, and I think it's disgusting for a councillor here to have made those comments.
But Dr. Mohsin says the best solution to hateful and ignorant comments is to spread even wider the messages of love and compassion shared since the terror attack.
I realised in the last 2.5 weeks or so that really people are beautiful. And that is the majority of New Zealand. I think what is important that majority of New Zealand continues to keep these statements, keep this pot boiling, so that even if there are other voices, then they should not be heard in the bigger bang, in the bigger voice of a unified New Zealand.
In Hamilton, Kirikiri Roa for Checkpoint, Alex Perrottet.
And Alex Perrottet's piece will go up online and on our Facebook page if you'd like to look at the pictures. Social media giant Facebook will today restrict foreign-bought political ads appearing on the networking site in Australia ahead of the impending federal election. It also says it will be removing fake accounts, minimising misinformation and increasing the platform's safety, only allowing political ads that are purchased in Australia to make the cut. But some experts aren't sure the safeguards go far enough. The ABC's Sarah White reports.
Well, g'day, I'm here with the Treasurer and he's delivering his first budget and it's going to be a cracker. We are back in the blacks. How are you feeling?
Prime Minister Scott Morrison uses Facebook all the time to get his message across, including talking to voters this week about the federal budget.
So that's phase one. We get ourselves back into surplus. That's what we announced tonight.
Facebook is now the most important platform for Australian politicians to get seen and heard. That's according to Fergus Hansen from the Australian Strategic Policy Institute.
Social media, of course, in and of itself is just a means of getting a message out. But I think in terms of being a platform that reaches Australian voters, it's ubiquitous. So it's used by essentially every Australian adult, and therefore it's a means of reaching every Australian adult with political content that potentially will sway their vote one way or the other.
It's not just the politicians themselves using Facebook. As the federal election campaign ramps up, our social media feeds will be filled with political advertisements from activists and lobby groups. But as of today, political ads that appear on the social networking site won't be paid for by anyone outside Australia in an effort to stamp out election meddling or so-called fake news. Fergus Hansen again.
The announcement from Facebook is essentially, bringing greater transparency to the way that people are, being able to look at ads and understand and interpret where those ads are coming from. For politicians, I think, it'd be definitely an important part of the landscape of assessing how they use this tool, but I think it's for the good of the country that we're starting to see greater transparency. I think there's more that we can do, and I think this issue is only going to become more important as we start to see Facebook change the way its platform works.
Facebook came under fire last year when it was revealed the company Cambridge Analytica had mined information from 50 million Facebook profiles of US voters. And it was also claimed that Russia was using the social media platform to interfere with the US election. David Carroll is the Associate Professor of Media Design at the Parsons School of Design in New York, and he's followed the Cambridge Analytica scandal closely.
One of the things that the Cambridge Analytica story and scandal shows is the international nature of the political advertising business and how it really requires international cooperation to solve some of these issues. So it's a combination of governments cooperating together because, as we have seen, no single government is able to hold these big companies accountable.
Associate Professor David Carroll ending that report from Sarah White. On Checkpoint on RNZ National, pulling on gumboots to give a kickstart to children's mental health, crunching the numbers on one of the world's richest divorce settlements, and the final design for the National Erebus Memorial is unveiled almost 40 years on from the disaster. If you'd like to get in touch about anything you've heard on the show, you can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or send us an email, checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. And here's Susanna with the headlines.
The man accused of killing and injuring almost 90 people at Christchurch mosques last month has been granted legal aid. He appeared at the High Court in Christchurch today via a video link from Auckland's Pāremoremo prison and faces 50 charges of murder and 39 of attempted murder. A Courts and Justice spokesperson says the defendant was assisted by a duty lawyer and is covered by legal aid for today's court appearance and his next appearance on June the 14th. He is being represented by Auckland barristers Jonathan Hudson and Shane Tate. Another 15 people have been injured in 2 road accidents this afternoon. 7 have been rushed to hospital after a 5-car crash on Whakatū Drive in Stoke near Nelson. Earlier, 8 people were injured in a crash on State Highway 30 at Rotomā in Bay of Plenty. It comes after one of the worst weeks on the country's roads, with 18 people dying in accidents since Monday, at least 6 of them under the age of 18. The Westland District Mayor says the Fox River has now been diverted away from the landfill to stop the flow of rubbish polluting beaches north and south of Fox Glacier. Torrential rain, which battered the west coast last week, swept rubbish out of the defunct landfill and along the coast. The Westland District Council says rubbish has been seen as far south as Martins Bay in Fiordland and up to Okarito in the north. Fletcher Construction has been warned after unsafe practices were reported on a $100 million Auckland wastewater project. The company has been given 2 improvement notices for unsafe work on the Northern Interceptor pipeline for water care. WorkSafe has given Fletcher until mid-April to develop a system to manage and control the risk of silica dust. The police have arrested a person in relation to a serious incident in the Wellington suburb of Karori this afternoon. A spokesperson says the incident is isolated to Lemnos Avenue and are not seeking anyone else in relation to the incident. The street has been cordoned off and witnesses say ambulances and paramedics in a 4-wheel drive vehicle were also at the scene. Those are the headlines. We'll have our next news and weather update at 6.
Thanks, Susanna. Let's get down to Friday business with Madison Reid. So, Madison, liquidators for Gumboot Construction, they've had something more to say?
Yeah, they gave us an update today. They released their first, but actually the second liquidators report. Remember that the original liquidators were rolled late last year. And in this report, it revealed that the creditor claims against this failed construction company, Gumboot Construction, they've swelled almost 4 times what they were 6 months ago. So the first liquidators report said that the creditor claims were $24.5 million. That that has now ballooned to $108.8 million. Now, that is because the largest principal contractors of Erebus, who had some of those 15 active sites when it went into receivership and liquidation, they've now laid their claims against the company. Now, the liquidators also said they do actually expect that number to grow. The swelling is not over yet. They're still expecting another $10.9 million in creditor claims yet to be filed. And also we should note that these claims do include about $757,000 of claims related to employee entitlements. But we should note there too that regardless of the size of the creditor claims and how much money they say they want back, they're likely that they won't get any of it back, because the receivers told us on Monday that there's likely to be no funds left over from the receivership to even transfer to liquidators to distribute to creditors. Within that liquidators report as well, we did get an update on their investigation thus far. They think that the three directors of Erebus Construction may have breached their duties. Now, there's three of them. Their names are Nigel Foster, Calvin Hale and Lawrence Phillips. Now, they've been put on notice by the liquidators. They've been told that legal action is likely. Now, I understand that those legal proceedings are likely to be filed in courts as soon as next week. We also found out that one creditor of Erebus Construction, we don't know if it's a he or a she, they were unnamed, but this person likely received priority payments from Erebus while it was still operating, and they're likely to be chased through the courts too, because liquidators asked them to set that money aside and they refused to do so.
That is interesting. Okay, NZX annual meeting, was it a ripper?
I wasn't there, so I don't know. It was in Dunedin today, but as we know, the NZX has been having a bit of a tough time of late. It's been slammed by shareholders publicly recently, who've told it to do better, to shake up its management, to cut down on costs, because its management have been known to fly all around the world to lavish events. And there is a bit of a bone of contention there, particularly in the way that it doesn't shape up to its, not necessarily competitors, but its counterparts around the world, particularly in relation to Australia, the ASX. They do things much better than the NZX here on a much lesser resourced organisation over there too. And the shareholders do have reason to be upset. The NZX's net profit for the financial year last year was down 22% and their revenue was flat. So at the annual meeting in Dunedin today, the NZX told its shareholders that it had planned to cut costs and that was on track. For this financial year, they expect to cut costs by about 8%, and they say that they had a pretty good reception from shareholders there.
Okay. Rest of the markets in our dollar, how are we tracking?
The NZX Top 50 index closed down almost I think I've got that wrong there. I wrote 4%, but that's certainly not right. It was a 0.4%, so that was just a fall of 35 points. That is another loss that we've seen. We have been on record-breaking highs of late. We fell last night and again today. So we closed at 9,857 points this evening. The New Zealand dollar is buying at 67.5 US cents, 94.8 the Australian, and 51.6 British pence.
Thanks, Madison. Have a great weekend. That's Madison Reedy with Business. And speaking of business, the world's richest couple has revealed some of the details of their divorce settlement. Mackenzie Bezos, ex-wife of Amazon founder Jeff Bezos, will give 75% of their stake in the company and all voting rights to the billionaire entrepreneur as part of the settlement. She will also relinquish her interests in the Washington Post newspaper and rocket company Blue Origin. Lisa Bernard reports.
The road to Jeff Bezos' divorce may have been littered with tabloid tales, finger-pointing and alleged blackmail, but the two main parties involved, Bezos and his now ex-wife Mackenzie, seem to be parting quite amicably. So much so, in fact, that Mackenzie tweeted on Thursday she's, quote, happy to turn over what undoubtedly amounts to a significant fortune, giving Jeff, quote, all of my interests in the Washington Post and Blue Origin, Bezos' aerospace company, and 75% of our Amazon stock plus voting control of my shares. The divorce settlement providing some relief for Amazon investors, says Reuters correspondent Jeffrey Daston.
There almost had been a cloud hanging over Amazon stock because with an impending divorce proceeding, investors didn't really know if, Bezos would give up his control in the company and would give up his stake, half of it, more of that, who knows. And the reason that question mattered is because Bezos is viewed as central to the company's success. So this says things, have ended amicably, Bezos will continue to be in charge of the company's biggest bets going forward.
Jeff, in a tweet of his own, responded with, "In all our work together, Mackenzie's abilities have been on full display. She has been an extraordinary partner, ally, and mother. She is resourceful and brilliant and loving, and as our futures unroll, I know I'll always be learning from her."
To her own name, she will have at least $35 billion in Amazon stock through this proposal that she announced on Twitter. And for all we know, she could have a lot more from the divorce settlement.
The dissolution of their 26-year marriage comes amid reports Bezos had an affair with TV host Lauren Sanchez, first reported by the National Enquirer. Bezos launched an investigation into how the tabloid gained access to private text messages he sent Sanchez, and later posted a shocking incrimination of the Enquirer, claiming parent company AMI and CEO David Pecker threatened to publish more intimate photos of him and Sanchez unless the probe was called off. AMI denied the blackmail charge and said the source for its reporting was Sanchez's brother, Michael. Both Jeff and Mackenzie Bezos tweeted that they will continue their friendship as co-parents, with Mackenzie adding, quote, "Excited about my own plans, grateful for the past as I look forward to what comes next."
Lisa Bernard reporting. The Ethiopian Airlines plane that crashed last month nosedived several times before it hit the ground, according to a preliminary report. Pilots repeatedly followed procedures recommended by Boeing before the crash, but to no avail. Boeing's boss has admitted for the first time a failure in the jet's anti-stall system was a factor in the crash. The BBC's Tom Burridge has the story.
Just seconds after takeoff, and this Ethiopian Airlines plane was repeatedly nosediving towards the ground. The pilots wrestled to pull up, but an automatic anti-stall mechanism on the new Boeing 737 MAX 8 was pushing the plane down. Investigators say the crew followed a procedure outlined by Boeing, but it didn't work. It then plunged 13,000 feet in 32 seconds.
The crew performed all the procedures repeatedly provided by the manufacturer, but was not able to control the aircraft.
On board 157 people. But 5 months earlier, another 737 MAX 8 crashed off Indonesia in a similar way, killing 189 people.
The MAX is Boeing's latest version of its very popular 737. New, heavier engines make it much more fuel efficient, but in flight, their weight and position force the plane's nose up a bit. If the angle of flight becomes too high, then a plane can stall and crash. So Boeing designed a computer system on the MAX called MCAS, which automatically pushes the nose down. Before the MAX was grounded, that system relied on just one of two sensors at the front of the aircraft, which calculate the angle at which the plane is flying. But in both crashes, the data from that sensor was incorrect. The computer system thought the plane was at a high angle of attack, when in fact it wasn't. Unaware of what was happening, the pilots pulled up. But the system was designed to reactivate again and again. And within minutes, they'd lost control.
Ralph Nader's great-niece was on the Ethiopian Airlines flight. Famous for battling and beating big multinationals over safety, a man who ran for the US presidency now plans to take Boeing to court.
Usually airlines and aircraft manufacturers get away with a quick settlement, a little bit of a public relations problem. My message to Boeing is, don't think this is going to happen again.
You can see that the aircraft is now in quite a steep dive. Now that's the effect of MCAS.
Captain Chris Brady has 18 years of experience flying 737s.
That's the stall warning to tell you the aircraft's about to stall.
He says so many issues now need to be reviewed.
The level of automation of the aircraft, the behind-the-scenes systems, the risk analysis processes gone through at Boeing, the oversight by the regulator, the conversion training, the level of training generally, the manual flying skills of the crews, the knowledge of these switches, all of it needs to be reviewed in light of these accidents.
Changes are being made to the MAX. On board a recent test flight, Boeing's chief executive. Tonight, in a carefully scripted video message, a recognition that the aircraft had malfunctioned. He promised a modified MAX would be among the safest planes ever to fly.
We know every person who steps aboard one of our airplanes places their trust in us. Together, We'll do everything possible to earn and re-earn that trust and confidence from our customers and the flying public in the weeks and months ahead.
But for now, hundreds are grounded, thousands of orders on hold, and multiple investigations will look at how the plane was signed off as safe to fly.
Tom Burridge reporting. People up and down the country have been donning their gumboots today to raise awareness about children's mental health. Gumboot Friday is the brainchild of mental health campaigner Mike King, who wants to make sure young people have better access to counselling if they need it. Brooke Jenner reports.
That's the sound of 10 CrossFitters out on a midday run. But instead of wearing their regular training shoes, they're wearing gumboots. Zach Nothling from CrossFit East Tamaki says he wanted to take part in Gumboot Friday to get behind its members who have struggled with mental health.
It's come to light that a lot of our members actually use exercise to help deal with mental illness, and it's something that is really important that we can bring awareness to them to let them know that we're available to talk to and we support them.
He says the gumboots haven't posed too much of a challenge as he's put gym goers through their paces doing drills and sumo deadlifts.
A lot of people have given it a crack to start with and then made it through half the session. Some people have made it the whole way through, but everyone's given it a really good try and seen what they can get through in a session.
Gumboot Friday's been organised by Mike King and his charity The Key to Life. He's compared struggling with mental health to walking through mud, and he wants people to show their support by wearing gumboots. He says every dollar raised today will go towards counselling for young people.
The problem at the moment is if your child wants to go and see a counsellor and you need funded care, you have to go to the doctor, and the doctor has to diagnose you mentally unwell. And for a lot of people and a lot of families, they don't need that stigma, and it's one of the major barriers.
In Gisborne, firefighter Bila Lolohere says a few of his colleagues have been affected by mental health issues.
Just because we're firefighters and we turn up to incidents like suicide and that deal with a little bit of a part of mental health, it doesn't mean that we're not affected by it or not prone to it as well.
And he says local kids have been getting on board with Gumboot Friday too.
I did have a daycare of about 8 4-year-olds come in who all had gumboots on as well. So that was quite cool for them to turn up, support Gumboot Day, come into the fire station and see that we were also supporting the same cause. So I thought that was quite a nice touch.
Wellingtonian Ali Perry says she experienced depression as a teenager, but she was lucky her whānau were there to help. But not everyone has that support. She says more people need to be trained to help young people get through it.
Having experienced it and seen it, I know what a huge problem it is, and I do really think there needs to be more understanding.
Ms Perry says it's hard enough being a young person without having to worry about where to turn for help. Mō te hōtaka o te ahi nei, ko Brooke Jenner tēnei.
It is 13 minutes away from 6. I'm Lisa Owen and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Do let us know what's on your mind. If you want to talk to us about anything you've heard on the show today, you can get in touch via text 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. 18 people have died on New Zealand roads since Monday, with at least 6 of them under the age of 18. And with the Easter break fast approaching, road safety experts warn the road toll is likely to be worse than last year. Miriana Johnson reports.
The AA are calling it the worst week for road deaths in New Zealand's recent history. In the last 24 hours alone, 6 people have died across the country, including a cyclist hit by a car in Nelson, a motorcyclist in Waikato, 2 people in Mangatainoko and 2 in Christchurch. The AA's road safety spokesperson Dylan Thompson says the road toll was on track to improve from last year, but that no longer looks likely.
Even though the numbers weren't great, but we actually had significantly less road deaths than last year. Things were looking like there was a bit of improvement from the previous year, and now in the space of 7 days, that's completely changed.
Dylan Thompson says it isn't just drunk drivers or speeding that cause crashes, but a simple moment of inattention can be deadly.
I think people often do get quite casual and blasé about the risks that are out on the roads, but the other thing is there's no one silver bullet. There's no easy answer that can fix all of this.
The Transport Agency's Road Safety Director, Harry Wilson, says the number of deaths on our road is a disaster. He says 50% of accidents are a result of good drivers making mistakes, and investment is going into ensuring those mistakes aren't fatal.
The government announced to put in median barriers, side barriers and safety treatment so that if for some moment some person does fail to pay attention, the consequence of crossing the centre line isn't death.
The government is spending $1.4 billion on road safety upgrades over the next 3 years. But the Associate Minister of Transport, Julianne Genter, says these will take time to implement, and education and enforcement are also important. The family of 5 who died in a crash on Tirohanga Road near Taupō on Monday were not wearing seatbelts. Police figures show the number of tickets given out for not wearing a seatbelt has dropped by 49% in the last decade. Julianne Genter says that more needs to be done in the area of enforcement.
We have increased the number of safety cameras and we have increased the number of road police, but I am asking questions about how police are operationalizing that and, what specific changes we can see in terms of enforcement. I believe we can still do more in terms of enforcement.
The police's Assistant Commissioner, Sandra Venables, says police are committed to reducing death and injury on our roads. But she says drivers have a responsibility to themselves and others on the road to drive safely. For Checkpoint, ko Miriana Johnson tēnei.
Now to the west coast, where toxic material is washing up after floodwaters spread rubbish from an abandoned landfill. The Westland District Council says rubbish has been sighted as far north as Okarito and south to Martins Bay in Fiordland. While the rivers spreading the rubbish from the closed Fox Glacier Township landfill has been successfully diverted, the massive clean-up effort is far from over. Tess Brunton reports.
Mike Bilodeau is on the ground at the clean-up site where he's coordinating volunteers who are having to avoid poisonous chemicals as they retrieve piles of rubbish.
We found some herbicide jugs with liquid in there. We don't know what's inside of it, obviously. Plastic containers that say toxic on them that have liquid inside. Roofing panels with asbestos. And some oil containers. We instruct our volunteers to just leave them.
Mr. Bilodeau is helping to get volunteers onto helicopters to reach remote parts of the coastline, as well as picking up rubbish on beaches to the north of the Waiho River.
Sometimes you think you've cleared an area and then you'll lift up a rock or you'll lift up a log and there's way more underneath it. And I've also noticed that areas that I've cleared, I've gone back the next day and just as bad, if not worse.
But he remains hopeful it will all be cleaned up, especially after receiving offers of support from across the country and donations from as far afield as Europe and Canada. Conservation Minister Eugenie Sage and West Coast MP Damien O'Connor met with groups helping to clean up the coast to discuss the next steps. So far, no funding has been pledged. Volunteer Andrew Elphick is preparing to be dropped into remote Westland tomorrow morning. He's devastated that the rubbish is entering the habitat of the Hector dolphins, endangered penguins and other creatures making the west coast their home.
Those will start to get infected from this plastic being introduced into the pristine place that we have on the west coast. And our best efforts to stop this in recent years don't stop this little ticking time bomb that we have in these dumps.
He remembers joining hundreds of other people to clean up about 300 metres of coast last year, after gale force winds from Cyclone Fehi exposed decades of buried rubbish in Greymouth. Mr. Elphick says they are similar sized dumps, but the scale of the spread is vastly different, especially if it's reached Fiordland.
It's got a large amount of plastic, and that's been now deposited over 300 kilometres of coastline. Putting it into perspective, if that number of people in Greymouth cleaned up 300 metres over a week, this is a huge, huge task.
Forest and Bird Conservation Group manager Jen Miller says the extensive spread of the rubbish will cost a lot of time and resources to clean up.
Our concern is this is likely to happen to other landfills that are similarly exposed. The situation will get worse because the predictions around climate change are likely to get worse. So we really need to take this very seriously. This has to serve as a wake-up call.
She says more than 100 historic rubbish dumps around the country are vulnerable. Westland District Mayor Bruce Smith says the majority of the rubbish is in the Fox River and beaches close to the river mouth. He says the council's contracted Enviro New Zealand to manage the clean-up of the Fox riverbed, while supported by the Department of Conservation, both regional and district councils and many volunteers. Mike Bilodeau says there are lessons to be learnt by all New Zealanders from the devastating spread.
Looking at this isolated incident, we need to sort of all take a look at ourselves and the choices that we're making when we're supporting the single-use plastic industry, because when you're down there on the ground, it's heartbreaking, and the things that you're picking up, there's things that we use every single day.
Efforts to remove the rubbish are expected to ramp up after the weekend. For Checkpoint, Cortes Brunton, TNA.
UK driving instructor Kevin Keeley has used the Instagram name @SussexRoyal for years because he supports Reading Football Club, nicknamed the Royals, and he lives in West Sussex. But he's discovered the social media company had simply taken the name, his handle, and given it to the Duke and Duchess of Sussex without any warning. Now, it's not exactly on the scale of Henry VIII taking Hampton Court from Cardinal Wolsey, but Kevin Keeley says it feels a bit feudal. The BBC's Chichi Azundo reports.
Prince Harry and Meghan launched their official Instagram account earlier this week with the handle @SussexRoyal. But Kevin said he only knew he'd lost his name when his son texted him.
I was actually clicking likes on lots of things because I wasn't posting. Obviously, that doesn't count as using the account. Hello, Harry and Meghan. If you do want my Twitter account as well, can you at least have the decency to speak to me, or you use your entourage to actually speak to me?
Instagram confirmed that Kevin's handle had been altered in line with its policy, which allows it to make changes to an account if it's been inactive for a certain amount of time.
It was a bit strange, I must admit. I was literally not even aware of it. It took my son to text me to tell me. I literally didn't even know it was going to happen. There was no notification from Instagram that it was going to happen. I have nothing against Harry and Meghan at all. I think they're lovely people. I really like Harry, especially because he's just a lad. But it was just purely what Instagram did.
Even though Kevin didn't post much on Instagram, he says he won't be going back on the platform anytime soon.
Chichi Azundo reporting. Marine scientist Jean-Michel Cousteau has joined a chorus of actors and celebrities calling on the Russian President Vladimir Putin to release almost 100 whales from captivity in the country's far east. The whales are lawfully captured in Srenya Bay by Russia for education and scientific purposes, but many fear they're being sold to theme parks in China, as the BBC's Georgina Smythe reports.
A whale jail floats in the Sea of Japan. On one side of the fence, freedom. On the other, a life of captivity. Swimming in circles all day are 11 orcas and 87 beluga whales. They were caught lawfully by Russia, which captures whales for scientific or educational purposes. But they also have monetary value, $6 million in fact. The price of some killer whales, which end up in ocean theme parks in China. Environmentalists are calling for their release, and now one of the world's most renowned conservationists is lending his weight to the cause.
The majority, if not all of them, if we can release them, they will be released where they were captured. So they can be reconnected, we hope, with not only just the same species, but potentially some of their family.
But releasing the creatures is a mammoth task, partly because the facility is surrounded by ice for parts of the year. Some of the whales have injuries from the overcrowded pens and encroaching ice. Others show signs of hypothermia as they're unable to swim to keep warm. The Russian government has launched a probe, but ultimately their fate will be a political decision between Russia's fishing industries defending their catch and environmentalists who argue for release.
And that was Georgina Smythe reporting. We've got some time for your feedback now. On the story about claims work and income staff are turning away homeless people in Auckland, telling them there is no emergency accommodation available in the city. Dilip has got in touch and says, I have been in a situation of being turned down every time I've tried to rent a private flat because of being on a sickness benefit, with dozens of other applicants that are employed wanting to rent the same flat. I no longer try to rent a private flat knowing that I won't even be considered. Additionally, the cost of the rental would leave only enough for a bare minimum for food, so one can understand fully how one can acquire a bad debt record. And while we're talking about MSD, earlier in the week on Tuesday we brought you a story. Ministry of Social Development was investigating a complaint that a caseworker had allegedly joked to a Muslim woman about taking a holiday in Christchurch. The complaint was made by a person on Twitter who said they were in the same Auckland office and overheard the conversation. MSD has just issued a statement to Checkpoint saying it took the allegation very seriously and conducted a thorough investigation, speaking to the complainant and the staff member. They also spoke to the client involved and their support person, who the MSD says had no issues with the conversation. And Kay Reid, who is the client services manager, says they only discussed their sympathies for the tragedy.
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui ko Susana Leatawa tēnei. The man accused of the Christchurch mosque terror attacks has been granted legal aid for his High Court trial. Brenton Tarrant faces 50 murder charges and 39 of attempted murder and appeared at the High Court in Christchurch today via a video link from Auckland's Paremoremo prison. The General Manager Courts and Justice Services Policy, Andrea King, says the defendant accessed the Police Detention Legal Assistance Service, was assisted by a duty lawyer and was granted legal aid for his court appearance today. Andrea King says legal aid is an important part of the justice system and no one should be denied justice because they cannot afford a lawyer. The defendant is being represented by Auckland barristers Jonathan Hudson and Shane Tate. Another 15 people have been injured in 2 road accidents this afternoon. 7 people have been rushed to hospital after 5 cars travelling in the same direction collided at 4:10 this afternoon on Whakatu Drive in Stoke. The crash left the southbound lane of State Highway 6 blocked and traffic delays were expected. Earlier, 8 people were injured in a crash on State Highway 30 at Rotomā in Bay of Plenty. Drivers are being warned to stay vigilant after one of New Zealand's worst weeks in road history. 18 people have died since Monday, at least 6 of them under the age of 18. The Associate Minister of Transport, Julianne Genter, says that more work needs to be done on enforcement of road rules. The Westland District Mayor Bruce Smith says cleaning up rubbish strewn along the coastline could potentially take months, not weeks. Torrential rain that battered the west coast last week swept rubbish out of the closed Fox Glacier landfill and along the coast. The Westland District Council says rubbish has been sighted as far south as Martins Bay in Fiordland and up to Okarito in the north. Bruce Smith says the Fox River has been successfully diverted away from the landfill to stop the flow of rubbish. He says more staff and volunteers will arrive over the weekend to bolster the recovery efforts from early next week. Children in the Auckland suburb of Devonport are being warned to walk in groups after a man with a van has been approaching children inappropriately. Devonport Intermediate School Principal Nick Hill says in 2 different cases this week, a man pulled up closely behind a pupil walking alone to or from school. Both girls felt unsafe and ran away and called their mothers to pick them up. They both described a man in his 30s with a white Toyota van. Mr Hill says people at a nearby primary school have also seen the man with a white 7-seater Toyota van on their school playing courts this morning.
Our children need to walk to and from school in pairs or larger groups at the moment, and they need to make sure that they're going home in the most direct route, and they take the same route to and from school just to be safe.
Nick Hill says he has alerted nearby schools, asked for extra police patrols and asked parents to talk about safety with their children. WorkSafe has warned Fletcher Construction about its unsafe practices on a $100 million Auckland wastewater project. The company is building the Northern Interceptor pipeline for water care, and the site has been given 2 improvement notices for unsafe work. Leith Hufferdine reports.
WorkSafe says it had concerns about the site reported to it at the end of March. Now, Fletcher has until mid-April to develop a system to manage and control the risk of silica dust, which can cause serious lung disease. It's also known to contribute to lung cancer. Fletcher is also required to maintain safe distances between people and equipment on site. Watercare says it's concerned about the issue and has made Fletcher aware of its worries. Ko Leith Hufferdine, TNA.
A high-level source in Ecuador has told WikiLeaks its Australian founder Julian Assange is about to be expelled from its London embassy. Earlier this week, the Ecuadorian president, Lenin Moreno, said Mr Assange had repeatedly violated the terms of his asylum. The ABC's Mandy Sami has the latest.
Julian Assange has been living in Ecuador's embassy in London for more than 6 years. He's been facing mounting pressure to leave the embassy. Now, WikiLeaks has confirmed on Twitter that a high-level source within the Ecuadorian state says Mr Assange will be expelled within hours to days. WikiLeaks says it's been told that Ecuador already has an agreement with the UK for his arrest. It has previously been reported by the New York Times that Ecuador's president is trying to surrender the Australian in exchange for US debt relief. That claim has not been independently verified.
Mandy Sami reporting. It's coming up to 6:05. The Highlanders assistant coach Glenn Delaney hopes his side has learnt from last month's Super Rugby defeat to the Hurricanes. The two sides meet in Dunedin tonight, 4 weeks after the Hurricanes snatched a win with a last-minute penalty.
You want to try and make your own luck, and we had opportunities to close that game down, and again, there was some decisions that didn't perhaps go our way. C'est la vie, that happens. But we just want to make sure that we're in the right part of the field when the big moments come, and we're the ones scoring the points, not them.
The All Black Sevens kick off their latest round of the World Series in Hong Kong tonight when they play Australia. First up in a tough pool that also features Kenya and Fiji, who have won the tournament for the past 4 years running. The New Zealand women's football team is again without Hannah Wilkinson for its 2 friendlies against Norway, the first of which is overnight. The striker is back in non-contact training after tearing the anterior cruciate ligament last year and hopes to make a full recovery before the World Cup in June.
I will be back into contact very soon, kind of easing back in, feeling pretty surprisingly comfortable on the ball, which is really good. So I've got about a month to kind of just get comfortable on the ball, get confident on the ball and just work on that mental side of things.
Hannah Wilkinson. That's the news.
Tomorrow morning, Luke Wright is credited with rejuvenating poetry in the UK. Savage and moving and funny is what he does. Margaret Long, whose beautiful garden in Canterbury makes one want to just give up, really. And Sarah Perry, author of the tremendously good The Essex Serpent. Join me, Kim Hill, tomorrow morning from 8 on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland to North Taranaki, including the Central High Country and Eastern Bay of Plenty. Cloudy periods, isolated showers in Northland and Auckland today. Scattered afternoon and evening showers tomorrow, possibly heavy. For Coromandel Peninsula and Western Bay of Plenty, showers turning to rain tonight with heavy falls tomorrow. South Taranaki through to Kapiti, also Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, a few showers. Wairarapa, Wellington, Marlborough and North Canterbury, rain with heavy falls tomorrow. For the remainder of Canterbury, rain easing to showers today, becoming fine tomorrow. Nelson and Buller, cloudy periods with scattered showers today and tomorrow night. Westland and Fiordland, showers in Westland clearing, then fine everywhere. Otago and Southland, showers, mostly coastal, clearing to fine weather tomorrow. Chatham Islands, cloudy periods and the odd shower. It's 7.5 minutes past 6. You're with RNZ National.
Thanks, Susanna. This is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. The man accused of killing or injuring 89 people in the Christchurch mosque shootings has been ordered by a judge to undergo a mental health assessment. Brenton Tarrant was beamed into the High Court in Christchurch via audio-visual link this morning. He faces 50 charges of murder and a further 39 of attempted murder. The accused entered no pleas and will next appear in court in June. For many families of the victims, it was their first opportunity to see the accused gunman. Tafasul Alam was at the Linwood Mosque on March 15th. He told Checkpoint in the days after the attack that he was too scared to pray outside his own home and was afraid of strangers. But despite that, he went to the High Court today to properly see the accused gunman. Tafasul Alam says it was important for him to see his reactions.
He has been killed so many of friends whom I used to see every Friday in the mosque. And I didn't see him during the shooting. I was laying down on the floor. So I want to see how he feels after killing 50 peoples, innocent peoples.
Shahid Muhammad lost his brother Suhail in the shootings. He travelled from New York to attend today's court appearance. He says he's disturbed by the time needed to assess the accused gunman's mental health.
I'm not satisfied with this hearing. Just for the mental health for 2 months, I have no idea. I don't know how it's doing and how it's working, why they don't doing the speedy trials and everything. I'm really disturbed and really upset. And I'm not expecting, how it's going on I have no idea about anything.
He says the trial should be quick to limit the suffering of the victims' families.
I think it's not fair. Because 2 months just for to check the mental health and the documents, I don't think so. It's fair.
You want things to get on with it?
I want it speedy, very speedy. Should be speedy trial, special trial, and it's gonna be closed I think in a week, in a month. Everything is on the record. So it's already 3 weeks past away. I'm from New York, and I'm expecting the speedy trial from this court.
Shahid Mohammed speaking outside the High Court in Christchurch. Our South Island visual journalist Logan Church joins us now from the Justice Precinct in Christchurch. Evening, Logan. Now, you were outside the court this morning as the families were coming in. What was it like?
Hi Lisa, yes, I spent quite a bit of time this morning outside the court but also inside the courthouse speaking to some of the families who came here today to be in that very short appearance, about 20 minutes long this morning. I asked them why they came, and almost everyone I spoke to said they came here today to show strength. They wanted to show that they were strong and they were willing to stand up in the face of any terror attack against them. And that was also something, Lisa, that I saw across town today at Linwood Mosque, where Friday prayers were held for the first time since the March 15 terror attacks. I arrived at the mosque just after 1 o'clock, not long before prayers, and I was welcomed by the 30 or so people who were there with such amazing hospitality. The actual building itself is quite small. It's about the size of a small classroom, and as you walk in, you can still smell the incredibly strong smell of new carpets. You can see some of the new paint on the walls. On all the windowsills are cards from well-wishers saying "Kia kaha, we are with you, stay strong." And as I said earlier, about 30 people today coming for the first Friday prayers since the Friday attacks. Now, an imam from Australia by the name of Rabi Bezos came over from Melbourne to hold the prayers today. I spoke to him at length afterwards, and I asked him first, why did he come?
We came as an important and needed visit to our brothers and sisters in Christchurch, to visit the people in the hospital, at the same time to speak to our congregation here in Muslim members and the biggest family of Christchurch. We appreciating everything we have seen of support and kindness, so that was of big meaning for us. So we came to as well be part of that solidarity and support as well, and see if there's anything we can help or aid with, whether for the mosques or the people who have lost their beloved, or those at the hospitals.
Obviously this is the first time Friday prayers have been held here since the attack. What was your message when you spoke your sermon? What was your message to the people here?
Our message that the message of Islam is a message of kindness and mercy and justice, care and love. This indeed the message of this mosque and every mosque on the globe, and every Muslim, I believe, do share these valuables and these morals and manners, as we have received it through a long chain of history since the early prophets and messengers, ending with our beloved Prophet Muhammad upon him. So this message was always a message of care and love and respect and mercy and support. So we came to renew and to make the reminder again, and to say that we will keep following this path, and we are not changing regardless the hate or the enmity or the mistake that some people do commit by pre-assumptions or prejudging Muslims in the wrong direction out of ignorance. And I believe, despite all the pain and the blood and the suffer and the sorrow we do feel and we have seen here. I believe there's some light, because we always try to take the light out of the darkness and to learn the lessons in a tough times sometimes. And those lessons is there's a lot of goodness in our wider community, and people are prepared and ready to come forward and to learn and to see. So I would say, as appreciating your visits and flowers and cards and feelings, please, don't let it stop there. You come more forward and try to understand more what Islam is, what this mosque is, what the role of mosque is. It's something just for really care, and we can all together care for each other and live together. And while we Muslims and while everyone else is happy to be whatever God have chosen for him, the path, or he's chosen for himself. However, we can be all together. So please, don't let anyone create barriers or divide us.
And that was Rabi Beatty, who was the visiting imam at the Linwood Mosque, talking there to visual journalist Logan Church. The final design for the National Erebus Memorial has been unveiled almost 40 years on from the disaster. $3 million is being earmarked for the memorial to 257 people who died when an Air New Zealand flight crashed into the lower slopes of Mount Erebus in Antarctica on the 28th of November 1979. What it will look like was unveiled by the Prime Minister today near the Parnell Rose Gardens in Auckland. Our reporter Tom Furley was there.
It'll be 40 years since the Erebus disaster in November, and a memorial to the 257 people who lost their lives is finally taking shape. Standing at the top of a grass bank on Taurarua Pa overlooking the Hauraki Gulf, Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern told victims' families gathered that she was glad to have finally reached this stage.
Thank you for your patience. The amount of work that has gone into getting us to this point, not least in working alongside those who have been part of the design work. I acknowledge the burden that you have carried in so many ways for so many years, and I say thank you.
Catherine Carter was 15 when her father, pilot Captain Jim Collins, died in the crash.
I think to come to this point now where we have a memorial, national memorial, to recognise the lessons learned, and obviously the losses of the dead will mean that we can look into the future with some sort of sense of recognition of the impact that it's had on us all, both personally and nationally.
6 design teams were shortlisted, with Catherine Carter and Dan Maloney, whose father Nick died in the crash, joining a selection panel to decide on one. The final design, Te Pairangi Ata Ata, Sky Song, was jointly worked on by Wellington firm Studio Pacific Architecture, artist Jason O'Hara and musician Warren Maxwell. The firm's founding director, Nick Barrett-Boyes, says it's designed to show movement towards the sky.
It's really to do with moving out towards the light and to the horizon. And as Catherine mentioned before, when we read all the family transcripts and responses, it was all about the sky, leaving in the sky, and in fact waiting at night to see the plane come back in the sky. So we took the sky and the idea of moving out to the light.
The curving path will have a wall on one side with a unique snowflake cut out for each of the people killed.
So as you move up through the snowdrift wall, you head towards the end, and at the apex there's a whakatoki, there's a Maori proverb, and you stand there, and at that point you read the story of what happened, and when you turn around and walk back along what we call the ice wall, which is the other wall, are all the names of all the people, so they're all standing behind you.
Planning for the memorial's construction is now underway, with the unveiling timed for May 2020. For Checkpoint, Tom Furley.
Residents of a quiet suburban street in New Plymouth say they made numerous complaints about unruly behaviour at a Housing New Zealand property before it became the focus of a shooting this week. They say a group of young men have been terrorising the neighbourhood for months, but complaints to the housing agency were fobbed off and the police also seemed powerless to help them. Our Taranaki Whanganui reporter Robin Martin has more.
Armed police swooped on a house on Plympton Street in the leafy suburb of Brooklands early on Saturday morning after a 20-year-old man arrived at Taranaki Base Hospital with gunshot wounds to his arm. The injured man was later transferred to Waikato Hospital in a serious but stable condition. On Wednesday, police arrested a 21-year-old, Anthony Joel Heke, in relation to the shooting after officers surrounded a property in Westtown. Plympton Street residents say Mr Heke has been in the cul-de-sac on and off for more than a year. One resident, who preferred not to be named, says you knew when he was staying in the neighbourhood.
You certainly know when
when one particular person was occupied elsewhere, because the noise level went up and the feeling in the street went down a bit, and which is otherwise a very quiet suburban street.
The man says residents had banded together to lobby the authorities, but with no success.
Been ongoing for a little while. It's been chats with police, chats with Housing New Zealand and all that sort of stuff to try and get movement on it, chats with Jonathan Young, who's our local MP obviously, trying to get some form of movement on it, some form of reprieve, I guess you'd call it.
A woman who also asked not to be named says people at the property had no fear of the police.
Yeah, it's just been constant parties and cars screaming up and down the road and just loud into the night, and they don't seem to have any concern about police presence at all. Police have been around so many times and they'll leave and they'll start screaming out pigs, pigs, and so I don't think they are concerned at all about getting in trouble with the law.
The woman says when residents complained to Housing New Zealand, they said it was a police matter, while the police said it was a housing matter. She says meanwhile people have been afraid to go out on the street.
Everyone was really frightened. And there was no, the police presence was there for a while, but then they'd leave and would be back to square one. And it went on, like I said, for a really, really long time. And everyone, was working together trying to sort it out, but it just seemed impossible. There was no one that could help us.
On his Facebook page, Mr Heke claims to be a member of the Urutaha gang, and there are several posts inviting people to parties at the Plympton Street address, including one for his 21st. In a statement, Housing New Zealand says the alleged offender is not one of its tenants and it does not have a privacy waiver to discuss the particular tenancy. It says at the start of every tenancy, it discusses its expectations of tenants and they sign agreements requiring them to be good, law-abiding neighbours. The agency says it gets involved as soon as it becomes aware of an issue. Meanwhile, the woman says she's coming to terms with her street being the focus of a shooting.
I know for us and everyone else on the street that we were really shocked when that it's gone this far.
Mr Heke appeared in the New Plymouth District Court yesterday on a charge of wounding with intent to cause grievous bodily harm. He was remanded in custody and ordered to reappear on April the 24th. I ngā mutu mo te hōtaka o te ahi ponei, ko Robin Martin ahau.
Researchers say the amount of new coral created on Australia's Great Barrier Reef has plummeted by nearly 90% as a result of ocean heat waves. Scientists warn the structure of the reef is likely to transform completely if more bleaching occurs because of climate change. The BBC's Caroline Rigby has the story.
Coral spawning on the Great Barrier Reef, the natural wonder which is crucial for maintaining the most biodiverse World Heritage Site anywhere on Earth. But scientists say unprecedented bleaching events in 2016 and 2017, which damaged 2/3 of the reef system, also triggered a collapse in coral regrowth. With such a large area affected, it was unable to replenish. And that has resulted in a massive 89% drop in the number of new baby corals.
Their ability to reproduce has declined, so that what we call the brooding stock of corals has actually declined, and they're now producing less little larvae, which are the new recruits.
Research published in the journal Nature blames the problem on rising sea temperatures, a result of sustained global warming from the burning of fossil fuels around the globe. But scientists say the reef might still be able to recover over the next 5 to 10 years if there are no further bleaching events. But the likelihood of that, they say, is almost inconceivable.
Caroline Rigby reporting. Facebook founder Mark Zuckerberg says a delay on live streaming might have limited views of the Christchurch mosque attacks, which were streamed by the accused gunman. Facebook has endured sustained global criticism around the world for the delay in removing the live stream of the attacks, even after being approached by the New Zealand police. Speaking to ABC's George Stephanopoulos, Mr Zuckerberg acknowledged more can be done to combat objectionable material online, but says any delay to Facebook Live's capabilities went against its core purpose.
We need to build our systems to be able to identify
live stream terror events more quickly as it's happening, which is a terrible thing.
Would a delay help? Any delay of live streaming?
It might in this case, but it would also fundamentally break what live streaming is for people. Not just broadcasting, you're communicating and people are commenting back. But one of the things that this flagged for me overall was the extent to which bad actors are going to try to get around our systems.
And that was Facebook founder Mark Zuckerberg talking to the ABC's George Stephanopoulos. 85 small earthquakes have been detected off Gisborne and the Mahia Peninsula since Monday, all triggered by a major slow slip event, according to scientists. GNS Science says its GPS sensors have detected land movement associated with what's effectively a slow-motion earthquake that happens over weeks, months and even years. Our reporter Sarah Robson spoke to GNS geophysicist Laura Wallace about what they've detected.
Yeah, so we've just noticed over the last week with GPS sensors that are operated by GeoNet off along the East Coast up near Gisborne and Hawke's Bay that another slow slip event has just started up in that area earlier this week. And it looks like quite a good one, sort of similar in size to the larger ones we've seen up there back in 2010 and 2014. And these slow slip events are happening on the Hikurangi subduction zone, which is really the major plate boundary fault that runs beneath the North Island.
So what does a slow slip event involve, and I guess how does it differ to an earthquake?
Yeah, so a slow slip event in some ways is similar to an earthquake because it involves more rapid than normal movement between two pieces of the Earth's crust along a fault. Except that movement in an earthquake happens in seconds, so you get that sudden energy release and shaking, where these slow slip events are sort of like slow motion earthquakes that take, days to weeks to months, sometimes even years to happen.
Your GPS monitoring has picked up some movement already. How much movement has there been? What have you kind of seen so far?
Yeah, we've seen the movement happen since about the beginning of this week. The two GPS sites that have moved the most are two sites close to Gisborne, and they've moved sort of in the east-southeast direction by about 3 centimeters over that week-long period. And normally these slow slip events that we see up in Gisborne tend to last about 2 to 3 weeks. So we do expect more movement in this slow slip event over the next couple of weeks, and so we're keeping an eye on that.
Having a look at your recent earthquakes, there's been a few off the east coast. Are they sort of part of this slow slip event?
Yeah, they are. And we've actually seen this in the past. So there's been particularly around the Mahia Peninsula area, sort of dozens and dozens of small earthquakes over the last week since this has been happening. And we actually observed the same kind of behavior during a very similar slow slip event in 2010. Saw quite a lot of seismicity sort of in the same area. So this seems to be a bit of repeat behavior from that, similar to what we saw in the 2010 slow slip event.
But us humans, we can't really feel what's going on with these slow slip events.
That's right, and that's why we've really only known about slow slip events in the last 15 years or so, because the only way that we can see them happening is with these continuously operating GPS instruments that can actually monitor movement of the land at kind of a millimeter level, so we can actually see these very slow earthquakes happening. And our ability to see that has really sort of blown open our understanding of how faults work and have raised a whole lot of questions about what is the relationship between slow slip events and earthquakes as well.
And that was geophysicist Laura Wallace speaking to our reporter Sarah Robson about those small quakes that are near Gisborne and also the Mahia Peninsula. Time for a little bit of your feedback now. On the road toll this week, dreadful week on our roads with 18 people dying since Monday and warnings really that coming up to the long weekend with Easter that it's anticipated that we will, go over the road toll from last year. This person, Helen, says enforcement doesn't seem to be doing great things for our road toll to date. How about rewarding good driving habits, e.g. petrol vouchers or going into a cash lottery for wearing your seatbelt? An unusual approach, I know, but not much else is working. Let's reinforce good habits. Just a thought, says Helen. Thanks for sharing your thoughts with us. And also, obviously, a big day in Christchurch today with the appearance of the accused gunman and a number of family members of the victims and some of the victims themselves went to court to witness that appearance, which was through an audio-visual link. So the accused did not actually appear in court, but was sort of beamed into the courtroom. This person says, I agree with the relatives' concerns. Goodness knows what 2 months of solitary will do to the accused's mental health, which is being assessed over that period. That from Steve. So the accused gunman has been ordered to undergo a mental health assessment, which is estimated could take a couple of months. Michael Bradley has got in touch and says, I'm trying to get the idea out there that it's a practical approach to sentence the alleged mass murderer to deportation to Australia. They would not be able to object, and it's an irony. They would have no choice but to imprison him, as he would be a higher risk. And let's face it, they, not us, were the prison colony. And just before we go, feedback on using the alleged killer's name. This person says, please, please, please ask the newsreaders to stop saying the name of that dreadful killer several times during every news broadcast, and please explain why today Radio New Zealand has decided to name the Christchurch gunman. I'm very disappointed. This is not a change in policy. This has been our policy the entire time, to use his name sparingly and only when it's needed in the context of stories. You can read our CEO's comments and our editorial policy on our website, and we'll actually post it on our Facebook page so that you can see it in its entirety if you want to check that out. We are using it judiciously. That is all we've got time for tonight on Checkpoint. Thank you so much for joining us on radio, on TV, online, and we'll see you next week.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. A judge has ordered the man accused of killing 50 people and wounding 39 in Christchurch last month to undergo a mental health assessment. 15 people have been injured in 2 road accidents this afternoon, 8 in a 2-car crash near Rotomar in Bay of Plenty, and 7 who were rushed to hospital after a 5-car collision on State Highway 6 in Stoke. More volunteers are being enlisted to clean up the coast of South Westland, which was strewn with rubbish after last week's torrential rain eroded an old landfill. And Fletcher Construction has been given a deadline of mid-April to manage and control the risk of silica dust on the Northern Interceptor pipeline in Auckland. Those are the headlines. Our next news will be at 7.
Take the pulse of the day's news every weeknight at 10.
Well, look, who knows who's in cahoots with who?
Lately with me, Karen Hay, is your late-night eye on the latest headlines and the people who are making them.